The German Shepherd in the freezing winter begs to enter the house. What happens next will leave you stunned. Don't forget to subscribe to the Stories of Life's Acts channel. And before we continue this story, let us know where you are from. If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to subscribe, as we release videos every day at 12:30 p.m. The days Antony spent living deep in the forest were always his most cherished. He didn't choose this life to escape, but because he loved the tranquility it offered. 4 years ago, when he left his office job in the bustling city, Antony bought a small wooden house nestled on the rugged mountainside near Pinecrest, where nature embraced him like a gentle hug. Each day began with a hot cup of coffee and ended with the crackling of a fire in the hearth, while everything in between was an almost unimaginable stillness. But everything changed the night the snowstorm hit. The wind howled around the small house like the eerie cries of wild wolves. The snow blanketed everything in white, transforming the once peaceful forest into a cold, oppressive land. Antony sat by the hearth, an old book in his hands, but his mind could not focus. The flames danced on the wooden walls, casting his shadow, creating a scene that was both warm and solitary. It was then that he heard the faint, weak scratching sound. Antony looked up, squinting his eyes as he listened closely. The house was so quiet that even the smallest sound echoed like a warning. He told himself it was just the wind whipping the trees against the door in the storm, but then the scratching came again, this time accompanied by a low, hoarse groan, soft yet enough to send a shiver down his spine. He stood up and walked over to the old wooden door. The cold wind bit through the air, as if it wanted to tear everything apart when he cracked the door open. Standing before him was a German Shepherd. Its thick fur was frozen, caked in patches of ice and snow. Its eyes, dark and deep, stared at him, not with aggression, but with desperation, like a silent plea for help. The dog tried to take a step, but its leg buckled beneath it. Antony froze when he saw the streaks of red blood on the snow. "Take it easy, little one," Antony whispered, kneeling down and cradling the dog in his arms. Its breath was weak, its body trembling from the cold. Antony could feel the lightness of its frame, as though it had drained all its strength in the storm. He quickly carried it inside and placed it near the hearth. Using a warm towel, Antony gently wiped the layers of ice and snow off its fur, piece by piece. That act was not just about saving a creature. It was also a way for him to confront the loneliness he had not realized he had been carrying for the past 4 years. Antony decided to name the dog Luna, for its bright, shining eyes reminded him of the moon. The first days of caring for Luna were a series of challenges. Its thick fur hid long scars, evidence of a violent past. Every time Antony touched a wound, Luna would only whimper softly, never resisting, but its eyes were full of caution. Antony knew that it wasn't just its body that needed healing, but its soul as well. Chapter 2: The Stranger in the Forest. As Luna slowly recovered, something strange began to happen. Every time Antony stepped outside, Luna would follow closely behind, its eyes fixed on him, as if fearing he might disappear. This unwavering loyalty moved Antony deeply. One morning, while he was tidying up the porch, Luna suddenly growled, her gaze sharp and cautious, fixed on the forest. Her fur stood on end, as if she had sensed something dangerous. Antony followed her line of sight, but saw only the still trees, blanketed in thick snow. "Is something out there, Luna?" Antony asked, but Luna only responded with a deep, forceful bark. Antony's instincts told him not to ignore Luna's warning. He decided to follow her paw prints into the forest, where he discovered a small, dilapidated shack, its roof heavy with snow. The shack appeared abandoned, but as Antony drew closer, a strong, nauseating stench filled the air. Inside the shack were large iron cages, some still stained with dried blood. Many of the cage doors had been broken open, and on the floor were broken bones. Antony felt his blood run cold as his eyes fell on a notebook on the table. The notebook was filled with detailed records of dog trafficking quantities, prices, and other chilling details. Antony's heart tightened. He had unwittingly walked into a dark secret, a place where loyal creatures like Luna were reduced to mere commodities. Suddenly, the sound of rapid footsteps echoed from afar. Antony quickly tucked the notebook into his coat, his eyes scanning the surroundings for an escape route. Luna growled, ready to protect her owner. A tall figure emerged, his face hidden beneath a slouched baseball cap. "What do you think you are doing here?" His voice was hoarse, filled with menace. Antony tried to keep his composure. I found 2 injured dogs in the forest. Do you know anything about this? The man sneered, his eyes glinting with malice. None of your business. Hand over that notebook and get out of here. Luna growled, stepping in front of Antony, and when the man swung a club toward them, Luna did not hesitate. She leaped into action, ready to fight. Chapter 3: Old Scars and New Mysteries. Luna lunged forward like an arrow, her bark fierce and full of rage. The man staggered back, startled by the sudden ferocity of the dog. Antony quickly grabbed Luna, pulling her back by the leash to prevent the situation from escalating further. The man stood, panting heavily, his eyes wild with fury. "This damn dog," he gritted through his teeth. Antony said nothing, but a sense of unease crept into his mind. He realized that this man was far more dangerous than he appeared. Yet Luna showed no fear. Her eyes remained sharp, ready to strike at any moment if Antony was threatened. "You would better leave," Antony said calmly, though his mind was already preparing for any possible outcome. The man glanced at the notebook hidden in Antony's coat, as if he knew exactly what secret it contained. But then, without another word, he turned and muttered something inaudible, disappearing into the snow-covered trees. Antony didn't waste another moment. He quickly turned and headed back to the house with Luna. As the door shut behind them, Luna kept growling at the forest, her ears standing tall, signaling that the danger was not truly over. "Easy, Luna," Antony said, gently stroking her head. "We are safe now." But were they really safe? Chapter 4: The Black Notebook. Antony sat down at the kitchen table, placing the old black notebook before him. The dim yellow light illuminated the scrawled handwriting inside. The pages, damp and musty, held content that sent a chill down his spine. 5 dogs. Type German Shepherds. Price 500,000 yen each. Delivery completed. Payment successful. Alpha male killed during transport. Fault of the courier. The notes were cold, ruthless. It wasn't just a business, it was a chain of brutal abuse. Antony kept flipping through the pages, and near the end, he found a name. Pinecrest Station, Testing Zone Number 7. Pinecrest Station ? Antony repeated, a sense of doubt creeping over him. This area was so remote, there couldn't possibly be a place like that here. Suddenly, Luna whined and licked Antony's hand, as if sensing his unease. He stroked her gently, then whispered softly, "We will find out the truth, Luna." Chapter 5: The Unexpected Visitor. 3 days had passed since Antony discovered the notebook. He kept his distance from the forest where the shack lay, but he could not shake the thoughts of it. Meanwhile, Luna continued to recover. Her sleek, jet-black fur started to shine, and her eyes grew brighter, full of life. But Antony also noticed something strange. Luna had become highly sensitive to sounds and smells, as though she were on alert for something. That morning, while Antony was chopping firewood outside, he spotted an unfamiliar pickup truck parked at the driveway. A man stepped out, wearing a leather jacket and a knit hat pulled low over his brow. He walked slowly toward Antony, hands tucked into his pockets. "Hello," he said, his voice rough like the night before. "I am Martin. I was passing by and saw this house. Thought I would stop by and say hello." Antony couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Martin's eyes didn't meet his. Instead, they swept over the house, pausing for a long moment on Luna, who was lying on the porch. "Nice," he said, a half-smile forming on his lips. "Your dog." "Thanks," Antony replied, keeping his voice steady. "I found her in the woods a few days ago." "Really?" ? Martin raised an eyebrow. "You're lucky. That forest isn't always safe." His words were laced with an implication that sent a chill down Antony's spine. Before Antony could respond, Luna suddenly stood up, stepping forward with a fierce growl. Martin paused, his gaze flickering with brief confusion. "I'm not doing anything," he chuckled awkwardly. "This one is feisty, huh?" Antony didn't answer. He took a step forward, positioning himself between Martin and Luna. "I think you should leave," Antony said, his eyes locked on Martin's. Martin stared at him for a moment, then shrugged. "All right, I won't bother you anymore. But be careful, buddy." He turned and walked back toward the truck. But just before he left, Martin glanced at Antony one last time, his eyes cold, as if warning him of something unspoken. Chapter 6: Clues in the Darkness. After Martin left, Antony knew he could not sit idly by any longer. He had to uncover the truth about Pinecrest Station and the people behind the Black Notebook. But to do so, he needed help. Antony drove to the nearest town, where he had an old friend, Sarah, a former investigative journalist who had left the profession a few years ago for personal reasons. Sarah lived in a small house on the outskirts, where she spent her time painting and tending to her garden. Antony ? Sarah opened the door, surprised to see him. I need your help, Antony said bluntly. Sarah studied him for a few seconds before inviting him in. As Antony recounted the entire story, Sarah listened in silence, her expression growing sharper with every passing moment. She said finally, I have heard of organizations like this, the ones involved in dog trafficking, but hearing about something like this happening right here is really shocking. I need to find this place called Pinecrest Station, Antony said. Sarah paused for a moment, then nodded. All right, but you need to be careful. If they find out you have that notebook, you will be in big trouble. Antony smiled lightly. I've got Luna to protect me. Sarah raised an eyebrow at the dog lying quietly at Antony's feet. I hope Luna is enough to face the people we are about to go up against. Chapter 7. The Journey to Pinecrest. Sarah spread an old map on the table, the yellow light from the lamp casting shadows over the crooked lines drawn on the paper. This is the northern pine forest. She pointed to a small empty space between the hills. If Pinecrest really exists, it must be in this area. But I do not understand. Why is it not on any modern maps? Antony studied the map carefully, his mind filled with questions. He pointed to a small road near the boundary of the area. Is this the way in? Could be, but it is very remote and not easy to reach. I have heard locals talk about strange disappearances in this forest. Luna, sensing the tension, stood by Antony, her eyes fixed on his every movement. We have to go, Antony said, his expression determined. Sarah raised an eyebrow, a flicker of concern crossing her face. Are you sure? This isn't just an ordinary exploration. You do not know what we will face. Antony nodded. The more dangerous it gets, the more I need to know the truth. If we do not act, they will keep destroying lives. After several hours of preparation, Antony and Sarah decided to set out early the next morning. They packed essential gear, flashlights, rope, small knives, and a camera to document any evidence. Luna walked alongside them, ever watchful. Chapter 8. Into the Forest. The weak light of dawn filtered through the thick tree canopy as they entered the forest. The air was biting cold, and each breath created a thin wisp of vapor. Antony led the way, his eyes constantly scanning the trees and paths. Sarah followed behind, camera in hand. Luna ran ahead, sniffing the ground, her ears perked as if trying to detect something unusual. Be careful, Sarah whispered as they ventured deeper into the forest. Suddenly, Luna stopped. She froze, growling low in her throat, her eyes fixed ahead. Antony raised his hand, signaling for them to stop, and crouched down to look at Luna. What is it, Luna? Before he could react, a strange sound echoed from afar. It was a faint but distinct engine noise. They are close, Sarah whispered, gripping her camera tightly. Antony gestured for both of them to crouch lower. They hid behind a large bush, watching the direction the sound was coming from. Moments later, a small truck appeared on the trail. It stopped in front of an old rusty iron gate, almost entirely covered in moss. Two men got out of the truck. One was tall with a thick beard, the other smaller, but his cold, sharp eyes made him seem just as dangerous. Lock the gate. Don't let anyone in, the tall man grumbled. The smaller man nodded, pulling a large padlock from his jacket pocket. Antony clenched his fist. We have found the right place, he whispered. Sarah silently raised her camera and snapped a few quick shots. As the truck drove off, Antony and Sarah approached the gate. Luna moved carefully beside them, making no noise. Antony tried to shake the gate, but the lock was too secure. We need another way in, Sarah said, glancing around. Antony looked to the left, where there was a low wooden fence. We can climb over there. They quickly scaled the fence, taking care not to leave any traces behind. Chapter 9. Inside Pinecrest. Inside Pinecrest, everything looked like an abandoned industrial complex. Rusted steel buildings stood motionless under the faint sunlight. The silence was so complete that they could hear every footstep they took. Look, Sarah pointed toward a large building with a curved dome roof. On the main door, there was an old sign with faded letters, only a few characters remaining. Lab. A lab, Antony guessed. The two of them approached, and as soon as they stepped inside, a sharp, pungent smell hit their noses. Inside, large metal cages were arranged in rows, many still with rusted chains hanging from them. They were keeping the dogs here, Sarah whispered, her voice full of anger. Luna let out a small whimper, as if sensing the pain of the creatures that had once been imprisoned here. Antony moved closer to a dusty desk. On it was a pile of documents, one of which had a handwritten note. Experiment Day 15, alpha subject unresponsive to stimulant drug. Plan to move on to the next subject. What kind of experiments are these? Sarah said, her eyes wide. They are not just selling dogs, Antony replied, his voice filled with rage. They are using them for experiments. Chapter 10, The Dark Truth. Sarah flipped through the documents quickly, her eyes skimming the faded words, each sentence sending a chill down her spine. Words like test subject, genetic modification chemicals, and neural stimulation danced before her eyes. Antony picked up a thick folder. He flipped through the first photo dash, an image of a golden retriever with hollow eyes and a body so emaciated that its ribs were visible. Below the photo was a short caption. Subject Beta 03, failure response. Transition to euthanasia. He gritted his teeth, his chest tightening. They have turned this place into a living hell. Sarah shakily pointed to another page. Here, a list of test subjects. One of the names, Luna. Antony froze, his gaze locked on the words. Luna? Luna stood nearby, her ears perked up, eyes fixed on them. Sarah flipped to the next page, and another photograph appeared. It was of a small white dog, curled up in a metal cage. The eyes in the photo were identical to Luna's now, intelligent, yet filled with a deep, unspoken sadness. They used Luna in an experiment, Sarah said, her voice cracking. But it looks like Luna survived and escaped. Maybe. That's why it found you. It wants to return to expose everything. Antony knelt down, stroking Luna's head. Thank you, Luna. You are a warrior. Luna gently licked his hand, as if to say that she would always stand by his side on this journey. Chapter 11, A Surprising Discovery. The sound of an engine suddenly broke the silence, pulling them both out of their emotional moment. Sarah quickly turned off the flashlight, and the three of them hastily hid behind a large desk. Through the gap between some old crates, Antony saw two men enter. They were the same ones they had encountered at the rusty gate earlier. What time are we moving the shipment today? The smaller man asked, his voice urgent. Tonight. The goods are ready, just waiting for the truck to arrive, the taller man replied. What about the failed experiment dogs? Throw them in the incinerator, like always. Quick and clean. No trace left. Sarah covered her mouth, trying to stifle her sharp breath. Antony clenched his fists, a surge of rage building inside him. We have to do something, Sarah whispered. Antony nodded. But first, we need evidence to bring this organization to light. He signaled Sarah, and the two of them cautiously moved deeper into the building, avoiding attention from the two men. Luna followed behind them, each step quiet and alert. They reached a large room at the end of the hallway. On the door was a small sign that read, Data Storage Room. Sarah quietly opened the door. Inside, there were rows of old computers and shelves filled with documents. Antony quickly plugged a USB drive into one of the computers and began copying all the data. Meanwhile, Sarah rummaged through the important files. Antony, look at this, she called softly. She held up a file titled Project Omega. Inside were detailed drawings and notes about a chemical called Compound X. According to the notes, this chemical was designed to enhance the intellectual and physical abilities of animals. However, most of the experiments had failed, leading to painful deaths or uncontrolled mutations in the subjects. They didn't stop at experimenting on animals, Sarah said, her voice full of concern. According to this document, they are preparing to test it on humans. Antony clenched the file. We need to stop this. Chapter 12, The Chase in the Dark. As they were getting ready to leave, a loud noise suddenly came from the hallway. There is someone in here, the tall man's voice echoed. Antony grabbed Sarah and Luna and rushed toward the back door of the building. But just as they opened the door, a flashlight beam hit them directly in the face. Stop right there. Without thinking, Antony grabbed Sarah's hand, and the three of them ran into the forest. Darkness enveloped them, but they did not stop. Luna ran ahead, guiding them with its keen instincts. Behind them, heavy footsteps and shouts echoed. They are running this way. Surround them. Sarah panted heavily, her legs beginning to tire. We can't keep running like this. Trust Luna, Antony replied, his eyes filled with determination. Luna suddenly veered left, leading them to a narrow ravine hidden by the trees. They quickly crawled through, holding their breath, waiting. The footsteps and flashlight beams passed by. Where did they go? Keep looking. They can't have gotten far. When the sounds gradually faded, Antony exhaled in relief. He turned to stroke Luna's head, whispering, "You saved us again." Sarah looked at Antony, her eyes now filled with resolve. "We have the evidence. It is time to bring this to light." Chapter 13. The Noose Tightens. Dawn broke, its faint light piercing through the trees, but it brought no sense of peace. Sarah, Antony, and Luna were still hidden in the ravine. All three were exhausted, but could not rest for long, as the enemy was still lurking everywhere. Antony took the USB drive from his jacket pocket, gripping it as if it were the most valuable thing in the world. "We need to get to the city and give this to the media or the police. It's the only way." Sarah nodded, but her worry was evident. "We are being chased, and they will definitely send more people after us. How are we going to escape?" Antony looked at Luna, his eyes full of trust. "We have Luna. She has gotten us through so many dangers. I believe she will help us get out of this one too." The escape begins. The three of them snake their way through the bushes, avoiding the well-trodden paths to stay undetected. But just as they were about to leave the forest, a group of men in black uniforms suddenly appeared in front of them. "Stop! Don't move!" Sarah froze in fear, but Antony grabbed her hand and yelled, "Run!" The three of them sprinted, but the men chasing them were just as fast. Footsteps and shouting echoed behind them. A gunshot rang out, the bullet grazing a branch right next to them, causing Sarah to scream in panic. "They're really shooting," she gasped. Antony gritted his teeth, his legs never slowing down. "We have to move faster." Luna suddenly veered right, leading them onto a narrow path filled with uneven rocks. Despite her fatigue, she ran as if she knew this was their only chance to survive. "Chase them. They cannot get far," one of the men yelled. The mysterious truck. Antony, Sarah, and Luna slid through a small cliffside and finally emerged onto a quiet road outside the forest. In the distance, an old truck was slowing down, its turn signal flashing to pull off the road. "Get an exclamation," Antony shouted, pulling Sarah toward the truck. The driver, an older man, looked panicked when he saw them running toward him. "Who are you? What is going on?" "No time to explain," Antony panted. "We need a ride right now." Sarah clutched Luna tightly, her eyes pleading. "Please, they are hunting us." The driver hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Get in quickly." The three of them jumped into the truck's bed just in time, as the men in black appeared at the turn. The truck sped away, leaving their pursuers behind. Unexpected ally. After the truck had taken them far from the danger zone, the driver stopped at a wooden house on a remote hill. "I am Jack," he said, leading them into the house. "I saw you were in trouble, but if you want to survive, you need to know who you are up against." Antony handed Jack the file and USB drive, explaining everything. Jack frowned as he read through the documents. "I have heard about this organization. They do not just experiment on animals, they also kidnap orphaned children and homeless people for testing." Sarah was stunned. "They are really that ruthless?" "Yes," Jack nodded. "I used to be an investigative reporter, but when I tried to expose them, they destroyed my career and threatened my family. I had to go into hiding." Antony clenched his fists, his eyes burning with anger. "So you will help us?" Jack looked at them, his eyes shining with a hope that had not been there in a long time. "I will, but we need a solid plan. This organization is very powerful. If we are not careful, none of us will make it out alive." A risky move. Jack led them to a small room beneath the house, where he kept old but still functional equipment. "This is the radio I use to send out secret messages," Jack explained. "If we cannot get to the police or the mainstream media, we can use this to broadcast the information." Antony and Sarah exchanged a look, their eyes full of determination. "We will do it," Sarah said. "We will expose the truth, even if it means sacrificing everything." As the group prepared to launch their campaign, outside, the darkness began to shift again. The pursuit was relentless, and the tightening noose of danger was closing in. Luna stood by the door, her ears perked, her eyes fixed on the dark night outside. She knew that their greatest challenge was still ahead. Chapter 14. The Trap in the Darkness. Luna growled softly, her paws quietly moving toward the door, her eyes fixed on the thick darkness outside. The rustling of the leaves in the wind did nothing to ease the heavy atmosphere, only adding to the tension that hung in the air. Antony stepped up to the door, gently stroking Luna's head to calm her. "Something's not right," he whispered to Sarah and Jack. Jack quickly left the desk, switching off all the lights in the house. "They have found this place. We need to prepare for a fight." The confrontation begins. The sound of car engines approached, getting closer with every passing second. Sarah clutched Luna tightly, her hands shaking as she thought about the danger that was about to strike. "I have some old guns in the basement," Jack said, then disappeared into a room at the back. He returned shortly, carrying a rifle and 2 handguns. They are not modern, but they still work. Anthony grabbed one of the handguns and quickly checked the magazine. "We won't let them catch us easily." Outside, the headlights of a car illuminated the house, and the sound of footsteps came from every direction, as if the whole forest was surrounded. A voice boomed through a loudspeaker. "Jack, we know you are in there." "Don't resist," Jack sneered, his eyes filled with hatred. "They will never stop." Luna leads the way. As the group of assassins approached, Luna suddenly barked loudly and ran toward the back of the house, her tail wagging forcefully. She looked at Sarah as if trying to communicate something. Sarah suddenly understood. "There is an escape route in the back, right?" Jack nodded. "There is a tunnel that leads to the mountain range behind. But we can't just leave without doing anything. We need a plan to slow them down." Anthony agreed. "I will set traps around the house, enough to buy us some time. You two get ready to run." The deadly traps. Anthony quickly set up traps using simple items around the house. Fishing wire stretched across the entrance, glass bottles placed near the doorframe, and small gas canisters set by the windows. "I am not sure how long we can hold them off, but we have to try," he muttered. Sarah led Luna to the tunnel, tightly clutching the USB as though holding on to their only hope of survival. She turned to glance at Anthony, her eyes filled with worry. "You have to survive. We need each other to end this." Anthony gave a bitter smile, his eyes unwavering. "I won't leave you behind." The battle for survival. An explosion suddenly rang out as a group of assassins stormed through the window. The gas canisters Anthony had set earlier exploded, sending a cloud of smoke filling the house. Jack and Anthony took advantage of the chaos, firing at the attackers. The sound of gunfire echoed through the forest, drowning out the rustling of the leaves. However, the enemy outnumbered them. They split into smaller groups, closing in on the house from different directions. Anthony shouted to Jack, "You go ahead. I will hold them off." Jack didn't want to leave Anthony behind, but he knew that if both of them stayed, neither would make it out alive. "Be careful," he called before disappearing into the tunnel. Luna returns. In the tunnel, Sarah and Jack ventured deeper into the darkness, but Sarah could not stop worrying about Anthony. Suddenly, Luna stopped barking loudly, then turned and ran back up. "Luna!" "No!" Sarah screamed, but the dog had already disappeared. Jack grabbed her shoulder firmly. "We can't go back. Anthony knows what he is doing. We have to finish the mission." Tears filled Sarah's eyes, but she understood that she had to keep moving. She hugged the USB tightly, her heart heavy with pain as they continued down the tunnel. Back at the house. Meanwhile, Anthony found himself in a perilous situation. He crouched behind a wooden cabinet, his gun now holding just 1 bullet. The assassins closed in on him. "This ends here, Anthony," one of them said, his gun aimed straight at him. Just then, Luna burst through the back door, growling like a warrior. She leaped straight at the assassin, knocking him off balance. "Luna!" "No!" Anthony yelled, but it was too late, period. A gunshot rang out, and Luna collapsed to the ground. Anthony seemed to go mad with grief and rage. He rushed out from his hiding spot, firing his last bullet into the assassin in front of him, before using the butt of his gun to knock another one down. But strength has its limits. Anthony was shot in the shoulder, blood soaking his shirt. He collapsed beside Luna, his trembling hand gently stroking her head. "You did well, Luna. You saved us," he whispered. Luna struggled to open her eyes, looking at Anthony one last time before she took her final breath. A dawn of hope. Sarah and Jack finally emerged from the tunnel and made it to a small town on the outskirts of the forest. They headed straight to a local police station where Jack used all his remaining strength to convince the officers to help them. With the evidence on the USB, the case was quickly brought to light. The media got involved, and the criminal organization was exposed to the public. But Sarah couldn't bring herself to feel completely victorious. She returned to the wooden house, clinging to the faint hope of finding Anthony alive. The sight before her made her cry out in despair. Anthony, gravely wounded, was still lying there beside Luna. "He is still alive," she screamed, rushing to call for an ambulance. Final chapter, Light After the Darkness. Antony slowly regained consciousness in the hospital, the bright white lights from the ceiling making him blink a few times to clear his vision. His shoulder ached, but the first thing he thought about was not the pain, it was Luna. Sarah sat beside him, her eyes swollen from crying. When she saw him wake up, she burst into tears, but these were tears of relief. "You are alive," she whispered, squeezing his hand tightly. "Luna, where is she?" Antony croaked, his voice rough. Sarah lowered her head, tears rolling down her cheeks. "Luna, she sacrificed herself to save you. She fought like a hero. The pain that never fades." The physical pain Antony felt was nothing compared to the anguish in his heart. He closed his eyes, and Luna, his loyal companion who had always been by his side, appeared clearly in his mind. The scar that her loss left on his soul would never fade. Scars that never fade. After recovering, Antony and Sarah returned to the cabin, the place where they had faced the fiercest moments of their lives, and witnessed Luna's noble sacrifice. They built a small grave behind the house, where Luna had always loved to lie and bask in the sun. On the gravestone, carefully engraved, were the words, "Luna, the loyal warrior. A friend never to be forgotten." Antony placed his hand gently on the stone, his gaze somber. "I promise I will live a life you can be proud of, Luna." The truth comes to light. The USB, filled with dark secrets of the criminal organization, became the center of attention in the media. High-ranking officials were arrested, and the victims of the organization were finally freed. Sarah and Antony became the main figures in the story, but they refused all interviews and rewards. They simply wanted to preserve the peace they had earned with so much blood and tears. A new beginning. A year later, Antony and Sarah opened a dog training and rescue center on the outskirts of the city, named Luna's Haven. They took in abandoned dogs, cared for them, and trained them to assist those in need. "Luna taught us what truly matters," Antony said, cradling a puppy in his arms. "Love, loyalty, and sacrifice. That is the legacy we must continue." Each day, they saw the smiles on the faces of those healed by the love of the dogs. It was a comfort, a light, that helped them through the pain of their loss. The light forever. One evening, Antony and Sarah sat on the porch steps of their home, watching the sunset. The dogs ran playfully around them, their barks filling the air with joy. Sarah leaned her head on Antony's shoulder, a gentle smile on her lips. "Do you think Luna is watching us?" Antony nodded, his gaze drifting to the vibrant sky. "I am sure she is here, watching us from somewhere, smiling." The breeze blew gently, like a whisper from the past. Somewhere, in the rustling of the wind, they could hear the familiar bark of Luna, reminding them that love and loyalty never fade. They simply live on forever in the hearts of those who love them. Thank you all for watching until the end. If you enjoyed the video, do not forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss out on the best stories. See you in the next one. The truth comes to light. The USB, filled with dark secrets of the criminal organization, became the center of attention in the media. High-ranking officials were arrested, and the victims of the organization were finally freed. Sarah and Antony became the main figures in the story, but they refused all interviews and rewards. They simply wanted to preserve the peace they had earned with so much blood and tears. A new beginning. A year later, Antony and Sarah opened a dog training and rescue center on the outskirts of the city, named Luna's Haven. They took in abandoned dogs, cared for them, and trained them to assist those in need. "Luna taught us what truly matters," Antony said, cradling a puppy in his arms. "Love, loyalty, and sacrifice. That is the legacy we must continue." Each day, they saw the smiles on the faces of those healed by the love of the dogs. It was a comfort, a light, that helped them through the pain of their loss. The light forever. One evening, Antony and Sarah sat on the porch steps of their home, watching the sunset. The dogs ran playfully around them, their barks filling the air with joy. Sarah leaned her head on Antony's shoulder, a gentle smile on her lips. "Do you think Luna is watching us?" Antony nodded, his gaze drifting to the vibrant sky. "I am sure she is here, watching us from somewhere, smiling." The breeze blew gently, like a whisper from the past. Somewhere, in the rustling of the wind, they could hear the familiar bark of Luna, reminding them that love and loyalty never fade. They simply live on forever in the hearts of those who love them. Thank you all for watching until the end. If you enjoyed the video, do not forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss out on the best stories. See you in the next one.